Hello and welcome to the podcast today. We are so excited that we have Jared Sinclair. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Talia?
Oh, I'm so awesome. I'm going to introduce you because you're amazing. I was so excited when I read this. Jared Sinclair is an herbalist and natural supplement formulator. He began his journey in the health and wellness field at age 7, shadowing his parents in their health store. By 15, he managed the store. That is so cool. Eventually purchasing it at 22. For nearly 30 years, he's owned Vitality Nutrition in Bountiful, Utah, crafting highly effective protocols and supplemental formulations for various health concerns, including digestive health, depression, anxiety, immune dysfunction, hormone balance, and even women's hair loss. Wow, I love that. Jared also hosts the Vitality Radio podcast, where he helps you master natural supplements, enhance emotional vitality, and thrive without pharmaceutical drugs. The podcast started as a local radio show 16 years ago and now has reached tens of thousands. His show explores natural alternatives to pharmaceuticals and government overreach in healthcare. Passionate about educating others, Jared eagerly embraces speaking opportunities to share his knowledge and of holistic health solutions. This is so awesome. Welcome so much. We're so excited you're here.
I'm
Can't wait.
excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled because we know each other. We're going to both be speaking at Be Healthy Utah, a couple events we're going to be doing in April. And what is your topic for that at Be Healthy Utah?
So I'll actually be speaking with my wife for the first time. She and I are newlyweds, but we've known each other for 6 years. And her story, which I actually highlight on a series of episodes on the Vitality Radio podcast, which we just called Jen's story, is a story of triumph over what seems like some really, really long odds. She was diagnosed with major depressive disorder as a teenager. She was one of the first people actually to be prescribed Prozac way back in the day as a 13-year-old. She fought through 10 years of addiction to pharmaceutical opiates that were prescribed for back pain. She was told that they were non-addictive. And then she became addicted to the point of a suicide attempt. She also was diagnosed about 25 years ago with bipolar disorder and had severe digestive disruption. When I met her, she had been diagnosed with IBS and a variety of other things. She no longer takes any pharmaceutical drugs. She no longer identifies as mentally unhealthy in any way, bipolar, depressed, anxious, or otherwise. She no longer has gut issues, and she smiles and laughs all the time. And she is a testament to a combination of things that I think really, really matter. That if you believe that you can get well, you can get well. And the key to that is education. And fortunately for both of us, we found each other at a time when we were both, looking for something in our life, both recently coming out of divorces. And she didn't know she was looking for what she found in me in terms of the health side, but she did find me, and I helped to educate her on some of these things. And over time, she defeated most of the demons that were in her life. And so we're going to be speaking about her story and how we did it between a combination of supplements and diet change and mindset change and things like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love her. I know her and I like her even more after hearing that. I can't wait to hear more about her story. She's phenomenal. So if people want to be able to come to this conference, do you have a code that you can offer for that at Be Healthy Utah?
Yeah, Be Healthy Utah. So if your listeners aren't familiar with it, you've probably mentioned it before here, but it is a great conference. It's one of my favorite weekends of the whole year. It's on the 19th and 20th of April, so coming right up. And it's a 2-day conference, but one day, either day is great. You can see all the booths. You can listen to a bunch of speakers. Most of the speakers are on Saturday. That's when I'm speaking, and I believe you're speaking on Saturday as well.
I am, yeah.
Is that right? Do you know what time you're speaking?
Yeah, if they just told me 3, what time are you?
Oh, we're competing. I'm at 3.
Oh, dang it. All right. Well,
So you're gonna have to choose.
you're gonna have to choose. That's all right. You know what?
But There is a pass you can buy too, Talia. You probably know this, where you can get all the speakers after the fact that you can stream at your convenience. And the challenge with this event is I can't remember for sure, but I think it's close to 40 speakers if I remember correctly.
I think
You
so.
can't listen to all of them, but you can listen to all of them after the fact. And there's some great speakers there, so I would encourage you do that. But with my code, you can actually get 40% off of the in-person event, which is both days, which brings it down to like 22 bucks. It's a steal for what it is. But you can also use my code, which is Vitality40, for 40% off of the speaker package after the event. So that's something I worked out with Shane and Liz, the organizers of the event, because my podcast, I have more listeners outside of the state of Utah than inside of the state of Utah. And so they worked that out. So it's Vitality40 at BeHealthyUtah.com. And I promise you, this is so worth it. It's such an incredible event. I love it every year.
Oh, there's so much transformation that happens. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking about just my weight loss journey with holistic approaches to weight. Also, how I helped with my infertility and the things that helped me be able to get pregnant after 10 pregnancies. So it's going to be phenomenal. And yes, I don't know if my code works for that. So use the Vitality 40 if there's any issues. Talia 40 is my code, and you can try either one and see what
There
see
you
what it
go.
gets them, right? And
Yep.
it's amazing just to be around people that are looking for ways to heal their mind and their body. Um, I know Jared and I both, have a lot that we share about that we've learned, and we know about mindset too, and that. And there's so much that happens with the way we think and the way we can heal our body, and it can transform people. So, for my first question for you would be just kind of how you got started and being able to communicate, and how this podcast came about, because you have a great following, and how you got out to speak and help people. We'd love to hear a little bit more about this.
Well, as you read in my bio, I was kind of raised in this alternative mindset. My parents were the kind of weird parents that didn't have as many, artificial colors and things in the. We had the boring breakfast cereals. We were eating the whole wheat bread, things like that. And we're talking back in the 70s and 80s when it wasn't so cool to be all about organic, that kind of thing. So they were very forward thinking people. My parents are absolutely incredible, and they raised me in a way that gave me a different perspective in terms of how I looked at medicine. I didn't know what aspirin was until I was an adult. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what you would use it for. We didn't even have it on hand in the house. There are a lot of things that are just kind of weird like that. When I look back at my childhood, and I think of how I was raised versus how others were raised, I recognize that we were a weird family, but I think weird in a great way. So that's sort of how it all started. But then being raised largely in a health food store setting, because I would ride my bike down to our family store as a kid at 7, 8 years old, and I'd be the guy, unpacking boxes and throwing away trash or whatever. And when I was 15 years old, my mom decided she didn't want to work outside of the home anymore. And they turned the store over to me. I started managing it after school and on Saturdays. And when I was 22, I bought the place. So that's what started the journey. The podcast thing is interesting because as a kid, I dreamed of being a DJ. That's what I wanted to do. I am fanatical about music. I love music, and I wanted to spin my favorite music on the radio. And that didn't ever end up happening. But I got invited by a guy who was a friend of mine, who's a personal trainer, who actually was a customer at my store. And some of your listeners may know him. He's a local guy, Neil Anderson. And Neil was doing a show on the Utah Jazz Radio Network called Fit Zone Radio. He invited me on to be kind of the supplement guy, to take questions on air about, protein and amino acids and things that, fitness fanatics are interested in, because by his own admission, that wasn't his wheelhouse, and he got a lot of questions he didn't quite know how to answer. So he brought me on. I was a guest on his show for about 6 months, and then he decided he didn't want the show anymore, asked me if I wanted the slot. I said yes. I took it over, and I've been on the radio ever since for about almost 17 years now. And then way too late, I got into the podcasting game a little over 4 years ago. I've got maybe 420 episodes or something like that now. I do 2 a week. And what I determined in doing the podcast is that initially I looked at it as just a way to get the word out about, natural options, why you might choose vitamins or herbs over pharmaceuticals, things like that. But I soon realized that advocacy was part of what I needed to do too. I needed to get the word out about things that maybe people weren't talking enough about, like things like glyphosate in food and genetically modified organisms that I am adamantly opposed to, and why organic matters and those types of things. So I started, sort of branching out, and I got to the point where most of my episodes I started doing a what I called the morning rant, and the morning rant was something that I was annoyed with that was happening at, say, FDA or CDC or pharmaceutical companies or food companies, and that I thought people needed to know about, calling out what I thought were
All the BS out there.
yeah, maybe lies that were being told, or half truths, mistruths, that kind of thing about our health, and talking about that sort of thing. So the show is kind of part advocacy, part educate. Well, it's all education, I guess, but part on the advocacy side and lifestyle side, and then very much on the education side when it comes to supplements. Over the years, I've determined, based on my listenership and their feedback, that what most people really want to hear from me is how to be a better consumer of natural products. As someone who's formulated products now for about 17 years, I realize that I have a little bit of a unique perspective because I sell them and have sold them for a living. I certainly use them. And then I also have formulated them. So I understand what happens kind of from the very, initial stage of the production process all the way to the end stage of selling it to the consumer. And as such, I'm able to help people kind of steer through some of the smoke screens of marketing, and what is a good supplement versus what isn't. We're in a day now, Talia, as you know, that everywhere from TikTok to Instagram, you've got a million influencers telling people you ought to take this. But then the question is, well, should you? Does it make sense? Is it actually a good product, or is it all marketing hype? And I spend a lot of time trying to help people understand, what is and what isn't a good quality product. And then if they decide it's something that's useful for them, how to take it correctly.
I love that. And you're like, oh, I probably started too late in the podcast. Well, 4 years, we've had all your knowledge and expertise. And, no time's the wrong time. You got it out there and you're sharing it. And it's like, that's what we need, because in a world where there is so many voices and things going on around us, it's hard to hear clarity and truth. So, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, was to share that there are ways that we can be confident. Do you feel that you have a message? Do you want to communicate better? What is it you want to share with people? And how can you get out there? Because for maybe even, I'd love you to share if you've had any struggles along the way, or things that held you back, why you didn't get started earlier. I know for me, there were lots of things that kept me. I thought, well, I don't want to be out speaking when I struggle with my own food issues. And I mean, it's like, I do you have anything along the way that kind of it was hard, that was your struggle, that kept you back? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The way that we even got introduced to one another is through friends who all had participated in, Lamont Wilcox's program, the Fly program. And he was instrumental in me launching my podcast. Actually, I went into him, and my primary thing that I was concerned about was that I'd been talking about starting a podcast for about 5 years. I had researched it, I'd bought equipment to do it, I'd done all the things, but there was something, and frankly, I'm confident now it was in my subconscious mind, because I didn't understand why I didn't do it. There was something in the back of my mind saying I wasn't ready.
Mhm.
And I told him that when we originally started meeting and talking. And within about a month and a half after my big session with him, I had a podcast launched. So he was able to help me kind of unlock that. And what was really interesting is I was very confident on local radio,
Yeah.
like in my neighborhood, so to speak, here in Utah. I think there was something about, maybe I'm just not the voice that needs an international audience like a podcast can potentially, become. Um, on a side note, it's kind of funny now. My podcast has actually been ranked in the top 12 in Belarus as in health and nutrition. So I don't know how that happened. I've been in the top 100 in South Korea. It's really wild, like
Wow.
where the podcast has reached.
Well, what are your thoughts? How have you gotten it out there so much? Is it just people finding? I mean, that is amazing.
best guess is that some world travelers, military people, maybe are out there and listen to it here and have brought it back there. I don't know, because from a marketing standpoint, I have really not marketed the podcast per se, other than in my store. And then I've done interviews with other podcasters like yourself, and people have found the show, through that avenue as well. But but it's just funny. I would have never thought anybody outside of Utah. There was a point when I wasn't sure anybody outside of Utah would want to hear my voice. And what has happened now is about 75% of my listenership is outside of the state of Utah. About 10% is outside of the country of the United States. Lots of Canadians and Australians and New Zealand. It's weird where the show is. I still don't quite understand how it got to all these places. But what it's proven to me is that, well, I was wrong in my assumption that yeah, I was a local radio guy and that's what I was. And B, that you ought not to limit yourself like that. And now what's happened is I have, as I've said, my audience is much bigger outside of the state of Utah than it is inside the state of Utah. And of course, that's built a tremendous amount of confidence, as I recognize that when I go on other people's podcasts, I always pick up new listeners to my own podcast.
Sure.
And that is enough for me now to understand that while I'm certain that there are many people that are not interested in my message, there are a whole lot of people that are. And those are the people that I'm out targeting now and trying to support. And we get so much incredible feedback about how the message that I share has been impactful in people's lives and in people's health, that I no longer, the last line of my bio that you read is I'm anxiously excited to get any opportunity now to share my message, and prior to that I wasn't so sure. So it's been a really cool journey.
Oh, everything you said is amazing. I'm just grateful that you're out there doing it. And it's just to touch for a minute about the brain, going back to, yes, where we got our start with that and how the brain works is there's a lot of things that are lies that come in. No one
Oh
wants to
yeah.
hear you. I mean, you're not good enough on stage. I was actually on the news. It filmed it on air this morning with Brooke Walker on Studio 5. And I was so scared to get up there. And I thought, this, I just said, I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to be here. And she was lovely and the crew was lovely. And I thought to myself, all those thoughts that I wasn't good enough or I couldn't help people. I think us doing this scary things that we thought was so scary gives other people permission to do it too.
Sure.
And that's what I've been able to work through with my brain is like, no, we can create this. And I started the podcast after I saw you do it a while ago because it was something I dreamt of doing for years. And it's just so cool where you've gotten and that you're out here sharing it. And one other thought that came is something I always say is, not everyone are my people. I'm not for everybody. And that's
Right.
okay. The ones
Yep.
that find us are the ones that are perfect for who we want to help. I
Yep.
wouldn't want to help everybody anyway because some people aren't going to get it from me, but I love how, and like you said, I don't know how they found me. You got out there. You got
Yeah.
over those thoughts that, you were just this local guy and look at how you're able to reach. So I just think that's amazing. Um, yeah, so I am curious. Do you have any I just feel like I want to ask you, with the people that you've worked throughout the years, do you have a story or two that come to mind with what you've been able to help people do through more of a holistic approach? Is there something you want to share for those that are out there either wanting to heal, wanting to move forward in their lives? What would you like to share with us?
Yeah, I have some favorites. I mean, when you've done it as long as I have. I'm 51 years old. I've owned the store for almost 30 years. It'll be 30 years this summer actually that I've owned it. And of course, like I say, started working there when I was a little boy. I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and I've got lots of stories, but there are a few that do stand out that are interesting. And my favorite story is my wife's story for obvious reasons,
Right.
because, well, frankly, when we met, I was so complete. This is another thing about your beliefs and limiting beliefs. When I met her, I was not ready to have a relationship, and frankly, neither was she. And yet, we were on a dating website, so that's how we met. But we were looking for companionship more than we were looking for marriage, right, or something like that. And both of us had been, pretty beat up in the divorce process and all that kind of stuff. And when I met her, I was certain of two things. And I actually said this in my wedding vows when we got married. There were two things I was sure of when I met her. One, that she was an unbelievably incredible soul, but she didn't know it yet.
Mm.
And two, that there's no way we would end up married. So I was right and I was wrong because she is an incredible soul, one of the most unbelievable human beings I've ever met in my life. And also, well, now we're married, right? So don't assume anything, I guess, in life. But her story is an interesting one, and I won't go into it in great detail, because if people are actually interested in hearing it, you can check it out on my podcast. It's called Jen's Story, and the first episode has been out for about a year and a half. We just recorded the second episode. We're actually going to have five. We're going to
Wow.
walk through every specific aspect. The second one that we recorded, the first one's kind of an overview of the story. The second one is all about what we did with supplements,
Mhm.
because that's where we started. The third one is how we got her off of pharmaceutical psych drugs. The fourth one is going to be what we did with mindset. And the fifth one will be what we did with diet.
Wow.
And so there's a series, and they'll all be out in the next few months. And I would encourage, I'm completely biased, Talia. She's the love of my life. But I'm telling you that I've shared her story with thousands of people now, and routinely people come back and tell me it's one of the best shows they've ever heard. They just love the story of hope and uh, triumph over fear and disbelief and depression and anxiety and all the other things. But the starting of it is one of my favorite stories to tell. So when we met, I took her out to dinner for the first night,
Mhm.
and I ate like I normally do, which is most of what's on my plate. And she ate very, very little. And initially I thought, maybe she's just trying not to, I don't know, look like a pig or whatever on the first date, right? She's trying to be,
I
you know what I mean,
yes.
trying to impress me in some way, right? But I'm a pretty bold and forward individual. And I said, okay, what's going on? Why aren't you, like your food? What's going on over there? And she said, no, every time I eat, I hurt. Every time I eat, I hurt. And I said, well, I don't mind talking about it if you don't mind talking about it. This is what I do for a living, right? What do you mean by hurt? And she started to describe it to me. And basically, it was she would get cramping and she would have to run to the bathroom 20 or 30 minutes after she had a meal. And she said it had gotten to the point where it was so bad that oftentimes she just skipped meals because it was so uncomfortable that she'd rather not eat than hurt like that.
Mhm.
So I said, and I'm gonna I'll tell you what I tell everybody. I said, well, I can help you with that. I'd love to give you a bottle of something to try. And this is where I put the little caveat in there. If you are on a first date with a guy and he offers you pills, don't take them. Okay. This was a anomaly. You should not do this. This is terrible advice. But she did. She seemed to think I was trustworthy enough, and of course the bottle was sealed and came from a store, right? But I gave her a bottle of a product that I developed, and I jokingly talk about it being my favorite child of my career. It was one of my first formulas that I developed years ago. It's called Back on Tract, and tract is TRACT, like digestive tract, and it's a combination of probiotics and digestive enzymes and anti-inflammatory herbs. And one of the things I love about it is people can take it and feel it the first time they take it. They take it with a meal that normally creates discomfort, and in most cases they get less discomfort or no discomfort. So I didn't give it to her that night because I didn't know it was an issue, but I gave it to her the next morning, and she texted me. I think it might have been a call, but I think it was a text at the end of that next day and said, none of my meals have hurt today. This
Wow.
is incredible, because she'd been years like this. It wasn't just a couple of months. She'd been dealing with this for 2 or 3 years. And she was just blown away. And to this day, she works in our store. And to this day, she tells people, of all the 4 or 5 thousand products we sell, my favorite product is Back on Track. And I tell people it's the product that helped me fall in love.
Oh,
So, so it's a pretty special one for me. Now,
yes.
we did a lot more after that, but that's kind of that was the catalyst of that whole thing from the supplemental side. I had a gentleman that still shops at my store. He and his wife are regulars. I see him all the time. And he was dealing with what would be considered, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a technical term for it. Now I'm trying to remember what it is. Anyway, he wasn't responsive to the blood pressure medication that he was on. And the thing is, they tried one, it didn't work. They added another, it didn't work. They added a third, it didn't work. They added a fourth, and he was on 4 drugs when I met him, and his blood pressure was in a high danger zone. If people are familiar with blood pressure readings, he was over 200 on his systolic and over 120 on his diastolic. Most doctors will tell you that you're a walking time bomb with your numbers that high. And this guy was in his 40s. He wasn't, and frankly, pretty fit. He was an athlete. He was thin. He was not someone who ate McDonald's 3 times a day. He was treatment resistant. That's the term. He was treatment resistant on his blood pressure. So he said, listen, I don't know what to do, and they're not helping me, and I'm afraid I'm going to die. So what do I do? And I worked with him, and it was really interesting. Things happen in their time many times in life when it's just things line up. And this one was one of those things. I had a product. It's called Cardio Boost, Cardio Boost, and it's a formula that was based on the research of a guy named Dr. Ignaro. And Dr. Ignaro won the Nobel Prize for Medicine back in 1996, I think it is, for his discovery of how nitric oxide works inside the human body. And I had been studying this, and I'd actually interviewed a guy named Dr. Pendergrast, who was kind of an associate of Dr. Ignaro, and he'd been on my radio show a couple of times and had talked about what's they called the reversal of vascular aging. And what they'd proven is that there are a couple of amino acids, L-arginine and L-citrulline, that over time, and not a significant amount of time, 90 to 180 days, you would actually start to see the vascular system get essentially younger, basically more elastic, more pliable, and that allows for less blood pressure because there's less constriction in the veins and arteries themselves. Now, at that time, I had not recommended it to a whole lot of people for this problem, but I had recommended it to a few, and I'd heard some really good feedback. And frankly, I wasn't convinced that this was going to do the job for him because, my goodness, nothing else had. I was sure it was going to help because I'd never had anybody that had used it that it hadn't helped, but I didn't know if it was going to be able to, normalize things. Well, it did. Within 90 days, his blood pressure was normal. This is almost 8 or 9 years ago now. His blood pressure is still normal. He's off all pharmaceuticals for his blood pressure. And of course, I have to remind everybody that I'm not a doctor and this isn't medical advice, but this is some of what you can see when you give your body something that it actually needs. And instead of trying to suppress a symptom with pharmaceuticals, you actually try to work within the body's natural way of doing things to support the body in its normal processes. And so that's one of my favorite stories. This guy has 3 kids, I believe. He's got a beautiful wife. He was literally looking at potentially not being here anymore. With one simple supplement taken consistently, he was able to turn that around. He still uses the product today. And every time I see him, he says, blood pressure's still good, right? It's really cool.
And no other medication besides that.
Yeah, no other medication for blood. I don't think he's on any drugs, but he's definitely not on anything for blood pressure anymore. So really, really cool when you can see, that big of an impact. And of course, like I say, the first story is my favorite because of who it surrounds, but that's one of my other favorite stories. And there are some others. We have a mutual friend, Suzanne Bates, don't you?
Yes, I just heard her.
Yeah.
We just talked. She's amazing.
Suzanne works for me now, and she started out as a customer. She says she was guided to the store. She actually made a U-turn after she passed it and thought, I need to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Came back around. She was mostly bedridden. She was very, very sick when she started. I'm interviewing her on my podcast in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to tell her story because her latest results on her blood tests are incredible. What has happened over just the last couple of years with her. She was in the store just a couple days ago, and an old friend saw her that hadn't seen her in a few years. And I didn't know they were friends. I know both of them, but I didn't know they were friends. And her friend looked at her and said, Suzanne, I didn't know you worked here. And she says, yeah, I've been working here for, I think it's been about a year and a half now or something like that. And she said, but you look incredible. You're glowing. She said, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. The last time I saw you, you were in bed most of the day. And she said, yeah, it's kind of amazing, right? What you can do if you feed your body what it needs. So Suzanne's she told me, and she'll share her story in detail on the show. And you may want to consider having her on your show. Her
No,
story
I
is
thought about it.
incredible.
She just reached out to me 2 days ago, and we just had this amazing connection, and I might
Yes,
start working with her, but the thing is, I want to. Her story was so inspiring to me.
it's incredibly
On all those
inspiring.
medications that she was able to get off of, and yeah, she's definitely one I want to, be able to yeah, it was just amazing.
And one of the most beautiful human beings you'd ever care to meet too, right? She's just incredible. So, her story is incredible. She's no longer diabetic. She no longer has heart disease. There's all kinds of things. Hers is frankly almost more impressive than my wife's in terms of how far down she was with her physical health, because she was also dealing with depression and anxiety and many of the things that my Jen was dealing with. So there's a hundred other stories like that, or a thousand, but that just gives you an example. And what I love about those stories is they're so exciting and so energizing that it makes everything I get to do for a living, I'm just constantly in awe that I actually get to do this and make a living doing it. It's such a fun and exciting and energizing and full of love career that my parents accidentally saddled me with.
Well,
So
and you can feel your love for helping people. I think I want to bring my family in. In fact, my 4-year-old, we've all had ADHD and different things, but she's so smart, but she's struggling. And, when we were first back in the day, it was like you put your kids on medicine or they can't function. And I just want to find some alternative ways. So I'm feeling really called to come in and talk to you about that. And my husband, he lost his dad at 47 from Lou Gehrig's disease.
oh wow.
And 2 weeks ago, he just turned 47, and I know he's worked through some help, just little things, nothing like the Lou Gehrig's, but just those natural ways to help our body as we get older, and I just think it's fantastic. One other thought came to mind. So I had started a publishing company called Soar Publishing because I have these books I want to write. And when I was talking to your wife a little bit ago, because I'm actually going to be speaking tomorrow at this, at Cindy's. What is the name of her company called? Cindy to
Renew.
Renew.
Renew, REENEW. I'm trying to remember what the other word is, but it's a Renew Spa, maybe.
But it's a neat wellness center, and it was just so neat to be in.
Actually, it is. I think it's Renew Wellness in
I
Bountiful. Yeah.
I think that's right. So I'll
Yep.
be sharing there tomorrow, but I also was just talking to your wife, and honestly, as you were sharing this, just chills. Like, she's got such a powerful story. I hope she's starting to write the book, or I'll give her a little nudge about because it's that creating that confident communication to share that message. How many people can she empower? And that's actually why Suzanne reached out to me. She wants to get this book out that she's working on, and I want to see people share what is in them, because I felt this stirring with all these books, and I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I published my first journal, and I'm working on more of the books, and I started this publishing company, but I know there's people that do. And so hopefully you're with all these cool podcast messages. She's already got a fan club. She's just got to write the book, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well, it's interesting, Talia, because we were in bed the other night, and as we pretty much typically do every night, we'll have about a 15-20 minute conversation before we finally say, okay, we need to go to sleep now. We just can't get enough of talking to each other. We're kind of crazy about each other. But we were talking just last, I guess it's been about a week ago Sunday, so maybe 10 days ago now. And she said to me something that she jokingly says she regrets now. And I think it's mostly a joke, but she said, I have been thinking a lot and feeling a lot that I need to tell my story more. And I've been kind of, giving her the gentle nudge for a while that she does need to tell her story more. So she said, let's schedule, the second part of Jen's story for the podcast. And I said, and it was funny because it was literally earlier that, well, it was the day before that I had been reached out to by Shane Watt from Be Healthy Utah.
yeah.
And he had asked me to verify what my topic was for my speech out there. And I had been hemming and hawing and frankly driving Shane and Liz nuts because I hadn't committed to a topic yet, but they wanted to go to press to print their programs 2 days later. They said, you got to give me a topic. And so I sent them over a topic, and I wasn't, it's fine. It's a good topic. It's something I've spoken about lots of times. I just didn't feel particularly invigorated about it. And now I understand why. But I said to her after she said this, I need to share my story. I said, Kate, so then you come speak with me at Be Healthy Utah.
Yeah.
And she said, are you serious? And I said, yes, I think this would be amazing. Let's tell your story at Be Healthy Utah. We'll do it together. And she committed and said, okay, I'll do that. And I immediately sent Shane a text and said, scratch what I said earlier. We're doing it on this. And so I committed her to make sure she didn't back out. And now she's planning on doing that. And she is looking to get the word out, because what happens is every time somebody hears that message, and it's not everybody, right? It's just like what you said. Not everybody's going to jive with you and your podcast. Not everybody's going to jive with me and mine. Not everybody's going to jive with Jen's story. But the people who do, they send me these heartfelt little messages on Instagram or in our listeners community on Facebook or wherever. And they say, wow, Jen's story really touched my heart. It really made an impact on me. It gave me hope that I can overcome whatever it is they were trying to work on at that time. And it's one of those stories. We've all heard them, right? We've all heard these incredible stories of these people that have survived against all odds. But what I love about, I'm going to say, the little people, so to speak, the people who have no fame, who are just living life, doing their thing, and they overcome, people like Jen and Suzanne. It's so much more relevant, I think, to the other people who have no fame and no following and no audience and are just living life, when they get to hear that someone just like them overcame this and found happiness and fulfillment and health. Then it's super powerful and it resonates really deeply.
And realizing that sometimes we don't need the famous ones that are out, even with this podcast, I've had a lot of high profile guests on it, but what I've realized is some of the greatest feedback have been the ones that are just so relatable. And
Mm-hmm.
I would love to even have Jen be on this podcast. I think it would be wonderful. And
I'd love for you to have her. She needs to
yes,
get the word out and she needs to get comfortable with it. And she's told me that. She said, I just need to get comfortable doing it. She after something that a lot of people don't know about her, but she was 10 years on opiates, and she was forced into a rehab facility when she almost died and had to be resuscitated, and was in a hospital for 7 days. So she ended up cold turkeying the opiates, which is an incredibly painful and sometimes deadly thing to do. She's never had one since. She's never relapsed in 14 years. And she spent the next 3 years of her life working with a addiction recovery program here in Utah, and became a facilitator for that program. She started out as a participant, and after about 6 months, was asked to become a facilitator, because her will and her strength and her story is a really, really powerful combination of things that people need to hear. And she just has this incredible desire to do anything she can for the person who's at the bottom and needs a hand back up, because she gets it. And I tell her that all the time. I've never been where she's been. I've never been one who has contemplated suicide. I've never been one who has ever considered himself to be anxious or depressed. That's not my lot in life. I've had plenty of other challenges. I've been divorced twice. I've had plenty of things that have not, I guess you could say, gone my way, or however you want to put it, challenges for sure. But I've never been challenged with that stuff the way that she has. So I can be sympathetic, but I can't really empathize the way that someone who's been through it can. And she can. And so because she can, people gravitate towards her and her story when they recognize that, yeah, this was a person who considered herself broken and unfixable at one point in her life, and now look, she's fixed herself. And her mom told me something that was so sweet and made me cringe all at the same time. Just last week, we were up there visiting, and she gave me a big hug and she said, thank you for making Jen so happy. And I said, I didn't make Jen so happy. I don't have that capacity. I believed in Jen. I gave her information and I helped to educate her. She made it happen. And when people recognize that it is within them to do it, there's so much power in that.
I love that. In fact, one of my big questions I like to ask everyone on this podcast is, what would you say to that one person? If you were talking to the Jen that felt hopeless, I mean, we get a variety of people that listen, people that are struggling to figure out how they can communicate, how they can move forward, how they can deal with all the pain. Um, some that are just wanting to move forward. So, what would you say to the one that either was where Jen was, or maybe I'll ask you 2 questions, health-wise, and then the one that's like, "I have all this pain and all this stuff, and now I wanna move forward and do what you're doing." So almost like there's 2 people you're just gonna answer that question to.
Yeah. So, well, the first thing is, I don't really believe that there are very, very few things in life that are insurmountable. There are very few challenges that can't be overcome. I mean, certainly there's a certain point in health where you can get to the point where maybe you can't turn back, that uh, issue that you're dealing with if it goes far enough. But there are people who have been sent home with stage 4 cancer who have recovered. There is something known as spontaneous healing. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Talia. I think it was coined by Andrew Weil, who's a great kind of naturopathic doctor. There are people who heal for reasons that nobody could possibly predict or understand. And some people call it a miracle. Some people call it phenomenon, whatever it is, and however you believe about those things, that happens. So, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that anything is insurmountable when it comes to health or mental wellness. And it's really, really important to understand that your mental health and your physical health are not two different things. They are the same thing, and they're just symptoms of a deeper problem. I talk often on my episode or on my podcast of the gut brain connection, for instance. And so when I talked to Jen, and she had already told me, this is one of the things that I honor about her so much too, is she is such an open book. I can go on and I can tell you all the dirt about Jen that's ever happened in her life, and she won't give me any trouble about it at all. She doesn't care. She's not one who cares about what anybody else thinks.
It would have been fun to
And
have her on here with you today, but we'll have her.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to do that one day. But that was the first thing that I noticed about her when we had our first conversation on the phone. We'd never met, right? It's just pictures on the internet, and whatever our best attempt was at trying to get a girl to click yes or whatever it was for my side, and a guy to click it on hers, right? It's
Whatever,
such a ridiculous
swipe right or
place.
left. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So we're on there. We had that information on each other, and she spent 2 hours. I mean, it was a good back and forth conversation, but she laid it all on the table. She told me about her suicide attempts. She told me about her opiate addiction. She told me about her bipolar diagnosis. And I asked her later, were you just trying to scare me away? And she said, yes, because I thought you were amazing, and there's no way you should settle for someone like me.
Oh,
And so that was her mindset back then, right? And I, of course, was very adamant that nobody's too low for me. That's not a thing, and I'm not too low for anybody else. We're just all at these places that we are after all the crap life is shoveled on top of us that we have to try and sift through, and eventually get to wherever we want to be. And truth be told, I was in a better position than she was, certainly on the mental health side than she was. But what I didn't recognize then, that I recognize now, is she was there to offer me things that I absolutely needed as well. And so while her contributions to me are less obvious to people looking at us from the outside, they're painfully obvious to me, what she was able to do for me. And one of the best things that she's given me is a blueprint of how to be my most truly authentic self, which I was always feeling like I couldn't let everything out. People didn't need to know all the stuff. There were
right.
things I was embarrassed about, and things that I didn't want, that I felt hypocritical about, all types of things like that. And now I recognize that, you know what, I can actually be me, and warts and all, and people can take it or leave it, and that's okay. I wasn't like that before. I was a people pleaser, born and bred. And I have been working with her over the last 6 years to not be that anymore. And it has freed me to be a much, much better version of myself. and to have much more authentic relationships with my friends and family and strangers that listen to my show and people that come into my store. So anyway, I am also good at tangents. But that's
I'm here with you.
one of the things that I love about her is that. But what I to go back to answering your question,
What would you say to that one?
nothing's insurmountable. It isn't. Nothing can't be overcome. And when you have someone like Jen who is convinced that she is broken and cannot be fixed because she's been to therapy for years, she's been on drugs for years, she's been through all the things that everybody said that she needed to do in order to be whole again, and none of it had worked, then she was done. She was basically done trying, really. The only reason she was still here, and she would tell you this, is because she had kids to take care of. That's why she was here. And that was it. And at one moment, that wasn't even enough to try and keep her here. Thank God she didn't succeed in that attempt. And she's still here for them and for me too, right? Now I'm going to get all teary eyed. But if you have someone who's at the bottom, and if anybody listening feels like they're at the bottom or near the bottom, you can rise above. You absolutely can. And frankly, you can do it 100% by yourself. It can be done. But there are people and there are places of education and information like Talia's show, like my show, like what we talked about with Lamont and his group, with the Fly group. There are plenty of really, really great, viable, helpful organizations, people that want to help, even if I don't know who you are and I've never met you and you live in a country or a state far, far away. I can help you through just listening to our series of emotional vitality episodes on Vitality Radio, or Jen's story on Vitality Radio. And Talia has some fantastic guests that have been on her radio, not to mention your story, your own story, right? And so you can do it by yourself, but you don't have to do it by yourself. You might not have a person in your life right now that can take your hand and help kind of bring you along, but there are those people out there for you. Jen found hers on a dating app. I found mine on a dating app, and other people have found help through her and me on a podcast with a couple of strangers talking about this story about how two weirdos fell in love and saved each other, right? And so it's out there, it's doable. Nobody's too broken. That, in fact, nobody's broken, period. You may have a broken up life, but you yourself, your soul, is not broken. It's never broken. In fact, one of my favorite books, if you haven't read it, Talia, is the book called Never Broken by the artist Jewel, the singer.
Yeah, I haven't.
If you haven't read that book, you must read that book.
Okay.
It is incredible. And she is one of the most incredible human beings. So now we're talking about a superstar that can help you versus, like I say, kind of the little people like me and, and Jen that can help you. But her story, holy cow, is it incredible. If you don't want to read the whole book, go listen to her Joe Rogan podcast that she did. It'll blow your mind.
Oh, wow.
Really, really well. And so the point is, we live in a world now where challenges and stress are probably as high as they've ever been, where defeat and feelings of defeat are likely as high as they've ever been. And yet in that world, we've also been given these avenues that we never had before to help our way out of it. We have the podcasting world, we have YouTube, we have social media. You can say whatever you want about social media, and there's all kinds of garbage on social media, and there's plenty of garbage on YouTube. There's plenty of garbage podcasts, but there are beautiful diamonds in all of those places too that can help you grab yourself up and pull yourself out of the place you are. And if you need help, the help is there. You just have to believe that you can find it and that you can do it, and you can do it. I promise you that.
Oh, I love it. Well, I was thinking of the song, and I don't know if you've heard it, but it's called Broken and Beautiful. I can't even remember if it's Callie Reed, but anyway, she did a video about the vases. Have you ever heard this, where these vases were falling and breaking, and how we're broken and beautiful? But there was like something, and please tell me if you've heard of this, but I want to say in Japan or something, it's like this beautiful artwork to put back these vases with this gold. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like this beautiful art that people pay all this money when the vases have been shattered and they're all mended together with this gold. But you can go look
Well,
up the
that's pretty cool. I'm not familiar with that, but I
yeah,
love
so
it.
what it's saying is it's a masterpiece. We are never broken. What we've created and all these shattered pieces that again that this is this artwork that people pay enormous amounts for to have it all put back together and you can see the gold broken pieces that have been mended, but it's the most beautiful work. So what you're saying is we're not broken, we're beautiful, and putting that together and watching that video and then even what you shared about finding each other and what we know about the six human needs. She had things that she was bringing with that love and belonging, helping you feel
Hmm.
safe to share, and you were able to contribute with her. And it was like you were both feeling all those beautiful six human needs together as you're creating
Yeah.
that beautiful masterpiece. And I just love that you've been able to share this and just being open that she's willing to let us share her story to help others. And I totally agree that, with us doing this Be Healthy Utah, start here. You guys come to this conference with
Oh,
amazing,
for sure.
if they just walk around, they're going to find people. In fact, I believe there's all kinds of people. I think even that Lamont's there, and everyone. There's
Yep.
lots of people that can help you. The other thought that came into mind is we're also going to be at this Arise and Shine conference, which is the 26th and 27th. I'm helping put that together. I'm speaking
Hmm.
there, and Jared will be there, and he's got some amazing. We're just going to have an amazing group of people who want to heal and join. My bit of advice is so many times as I felt broken, and many know my story, but coming from a line of addiction and the mental health and choosing food as my drug, right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
we all have our things, but what I want to share is we can keep going. We can find the help. We can find what we need. And if you just choose to just throw out the hand, I thought of the story, and again, I'll mess it up, but it was like something about someone who needed a lifeline. And I don't know if they were praying to God, but saying, send me something. And a boat comes and they said, no, I'm fine. I'm waiting. Well, here they were getting all these lifelines. And someone
Right.
said, grab this. And how many times is there something, a string or something that comes into our life or a person, and we don't realize that that is where we can reach up and we can say, okay, I'll just trust or I'll try. And sometimes those experiences or those lifelines are right there, but we either let them go or we pass them by. But just be willing that we're not broken. We're just sometimes a little help. For me, I needed help and different mentors and people. Right now, I'm going to come in and get some tips with nutrition and things because I've done all the others. And I know there's got to be some solutions for children that can
Hmm.
help. And I
Sure.
believe that reaching out and saying, hey, what do you have? What knowledge? And I also felt something from you. I could be wrong, but almost that you might have a gift with certain people. I don't know if you run blood work or if you know what supplements work or what, or if you're meeting and consulting, but that maybe after all these years, you just feel what people think. I don't know. That was a thought that came to me. Am I wrong?
It's an interesting thing. I've been doing this a long time. About 17 years ago, I started doing three things around the same time that were all very life changing and career changing. I started my radio show about 16 and a half years ago. I started formulating products about 17 years ago. And I started doing one on one nutritional consultation with people about 16 years ago. So, all within
Yeah.
about the same time frame, within about a year's period. uh, Seemingly coincidental, but maybe not. Maybe they were all supposed to happen around that same time for me. And when I started doing nutritional consultation, what I recognized is that I did have now at that point in my career a long enough history of working with people one on one, even just out on the floor of the store for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes at a time, being able to um, connect with that individual, ask the right questions, and deliver some good recommendations that I would then later hear positive results from, right? Much like in a completely different avenue, but much like what happened with Jen that first time that I recommended Back on Track, where the very next day she said, oh my gosh, this really works, right? And so I had built enough of a reputation with the people at my store anyway, that I could be a helpful and useful person in their, health journey. And then so then I started doing the nutritional consultations, and I don't do nutritional consultations like a lot of people do. It's probably, I do everything a little different than most people do probably. But mine can last as long as a couple of hours sometimes, because I really want to get into the weeds of what the history really looks like and try and find root cause as much as I can for people. I never thought of myself as an intuitive person. Never thought of myself as an intuitive person. And as I worked through that for the first few years, maybe it's been a decade or more now, I had a client who was back there with me, working with me, and had laid out everything on the table of what their ailments were and their concerns. And it was a pretty complicated situation. I joke around a lot of times with my clients that I'm the last guy. I'm the last resort. They've seen four specialists and their doctor and their psychiatrist, and they end up with some guy in the back of a health food store. But that's kind of where this guy was. He was about ready to give up on even trying to get better at that point. I remember the person. I don't remember any of the specifics anymore about it, but I'll always remember this one thing, and that is that I went out. I excused myself, and because I wanted to just go think about it for a minute. So I excused myself from the room, moved into the next room. Well, actually walked out in the front of the store, and I just started wandering around the store thinking. And I had my eyes open. I was looking at the shelves, just trying to think what could help this person, what could help this person, remembering that I didn't think that I was intuitive at all. And I immediately locked onto something that was on the shelf sitting there. And I grabbed it and I looked at it and I thought, this is it. This is the thing. This is what's going to help this person at least get started. I don't even remember what the supplement was. That's the crazy thing about it. I just remember the instance, but I remember that part so clearly. I walked back in and I said, I'm not sure exactly what I don't know what's going on with root cause for you. I don't know why some of these things are happening. I understand the symptomology. I get what's going on as far as that goes. And um, I'm not totally confident as to what the best approach will be for you. I'm always very open with my clients on whether I think I do or don't know. But I'm confident that this will help you. And I made a few other recommendations. There were a few deficiencies that were really obvious. I think he left with about 3 or 4 products, if I remember correctly. And he came back a month or 6 weeks later, something like that, and had remarkable improvement in a variety of different places. But what was interesting was the biggest improvement was from that supplement that I found that I didn't even know I hadn't even considered giving him until it just sort of jumped out at me on the shelf. So there, I have opened myself to the possibility that, hey, maybe I am kind of an intuitive guy if I just give myself a chance. And I've done a lot more of that over the years. I still largely go off of data and experience because that's kind of how my brain works. I like to have a little bit of evidence that this stuff actually is going to do what it does. When I was talking about the gentleman with the blood pressure issue, there's tons of data that indicates that stuff should have helped him.
Mhm.
And so I was very confident that we were going to get at least some benefit with it. Less confident than I probably should have been in terms of what it actually ended up happening. But yeah, lately now I do feel I am confident that people are guided to me when they need to be. And that if I'm open to helping them, that I can. Suzanne's an incredible example of that, who literally feels like she was guided to me. And Suzanne's such a brilliant person anyway. And so she's done most of the research. I just had to get her started. In fact, it was my son that she originally met with, and he got her started on some of these things. And the first product she started on, interestingly enough, is the same product I recommended for that gentleman for the blood pressure, because she also had severe hypertension, which is the cardio boost. So he got her started. He told me, he called me that night and he said, I just had an amazing conversation with this poor woman who is so sick, but she's so sweet, and I just hope I helped her. And I felt so good that he cared that much, right? So maybe I did something right as a dad. And then B, when I met Suzanne for the first time, who'd been in 4 or 5 times at that point and mostly had worked with my son Bridger, that she was getting significantly better and quite quickly. then and then when she told me that story and told me how she felt like she had to do a U-turn to get to my store because it just spoke to her that that was the parking lot she needed to park in that night. Um, it's pretty amazing. And if you are open to guidance, and you're also and the person that is you're being guided to, that's why I guess what I'm really saying about that lifeline, like you talked about, there is somebody out there to help you that you might not know yet, but they're there. And it might not just be somebody, it might be somebody's, right? There could be multiple different people in different areas that are available and willing, because I was willing to help Jen and I believed in Jen, but I didn't understand what I needed to about mindset to help her until I met Lamont,
Right.
who I was, and I met Lamont at Be Healthy Utah, the very first event.
Oh, wow.
So it's all coming, full circle again this year. He's
Oh,
speaking the
cool.
hour before you and I are speaking there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So if you're open to it and you're willing to believe that it can happen, and you're willing to believe that there are people there to help you, whether you know them or not at this point, you can find those people. They're there for you. And you've probably walked right past some of them already on your journey and just didn't recognize that they were there for you, but they'll come around again.
Oh, I love that. Well, one of the things, because I asked you that question because I felt like you're intuitive. And here's the thing, I've come to a place with my own thoughts and beliefs. I'm really confident about saying that I'm an intuitive person, and that
Mhm.
people that know me can feel that. And I just after this great conversation with you, I really trust you, and I really do know that you're intuitive. So I'm planning to bring my girls in that we haven't had a lot of just solutions with things we're looking for. And I'm just like, I'm asking that you just use that intuition for what my girls need, because I believe in you, right?
I'm
When we
willing.
believe in
I'm willing.
ourselves, others believe in us too. And I know I just want to be able to trust you with that, because I just think you're good at that. I think it's a gift that you probably don't realize that you can keep developing and doing, but the more you do it, the more it will come so natural. So I'm going to trust you 100%. And I want to come in and bring my girls in. So thank you, because it
But
might be what the
it's a
answers I'm
pleasure to
going to
work with
see.
you all for sure.
Yeah. So I want to say, after all, I mean, this is fun. This has been just a great conversation. I just want to say, how can we reach you if they want to tell us your podcast, how we can
Mhm.
find your radio station, again, where the store is, that kind of thing. And then, we'll put it down in the links too. So
Yeah.
just real quick.
So the store's in Bountiful, Utah, 107 South, 500 West. It's called Vitality Nutrition. Like I say, it's my family business. We've had it for 46 years. My son's the third generation now, and his daughter, my first granddaughter, is in there quite often as well, although she's only a few months old. But it truly is a loving family business, and everybody that works there with me, I consider to be family as well. We have there's a really unique vibe inside that shop. We have a website, it's vitalitynutrition.com. So if you're not near Bountiful, you certainly can find us online. We're happy to take phone calls and answer questions over the phone, as well as there's a chat feature on the website that you can open up and ask questions there as well. And the chat feature is always answered by either my son or myself. And then the podcast is probably the best way to determine, beyond this interview, if you think I know what I'm talking about, I guess you can go listen to Vitality Radio Podcast. And it's the full name is Vitality Radio Podcast with Jared St. Clair. It's on all the podcast players, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. And I'm on local radio still in Salt Lake City, although it's at 6 a.m. now. They moved me way up. It used to be 9 a.m. I'm at 6 a.m. on 1280 The Zone and 97.5. So the podcast is by far the
Yeah.
easier way to
When
listen.
are you on the radio? Once a week, or?
Saturday mornings at 6 a.m. just once a week, but the
Hey, but
podcast
those
hits
that are
twice a week.
those that are out there, getting their exercise on, that's a great time.
There you go. Yep.
Well, I am beyond grateful. I've liked you from when I met you, but now I just like you even more, and I'm just so grateful that you're able to share all of these wonderful golden things, and would love to see you maybe tomorrow and talk to Jen about this podcast when I'm speaking over there. And I want to say, for those that are listening, if we can do this, if we can get out and we can do the podcast and we can start sharing, we know that they can too, right? We believe
Yeah.
in them. We're just average people who are doing cool things and switching up our mindset and our thoughts. And isn't it neat, the opportunities that are coming this way? and we're, I mean, for you too, there's no difference between, this is what I feel to share. There's no difference between us. I mean, if someone else is feeling the call to do what we're doing and you see good things in what we do, it's because it's in you. If we can create this confidence and this communication line, I know they can do it. Any other thoughts, Jared, for before we close?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the one thing though I'll say, not everybody's a podcaster, right? It's not going to be their thing, and it's not a matter of comfort necessarily. Maybe it's just not the avenue that makes sense for them. I talked to someone incredible the other day on my show. Just yesterday, I interviewed her, and she did a podcast for a year. She runs an organization called Moms Across America that I think is just an incredible organization. She doesn't do a podcast anymore. She just didn't love doing podcasting,
Sure.
but she loves video. So she does little YouTube shorts and Instagram things and all that kind of stuff. And she's had an incredible impact. She tried it. She did it for over a year. She didn't love it. She moved on to something else. But you know what the podcast probably did? I didn't ask her this. I should have. I bet it built a lot of confidence that she could do it. It just wasn't her preferred methodology. So, you know, I am convinced that podcasting it's my thing. I do feel I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I resonate with a lot of people. It's a good fit for me. But you know, for you, it could be any number of different things. But when we're talking about, you know, the confident communication thing, I think what I learned from Jen that I think is maybe one of the most beautiful things that I learned from her is that when she was at her very bottom, she was out in the community in little groups of 15, 20 people in the back of a little church building somewhere, helping people with their addiction when she still considered herself to be addicted as well.
Wow.
And her communication was about, if I can do it, you can too. You can too. And she didn't believe in herself at all at that point, but she was willing to put that out there, and she was willing to hold the hands and hug and put her arms around these people and say, you can. And she lost people in that. She found friends whose lives ended in opiate addiction, but she also helped to save many, many people. And through her doing, I do this at in a very confident place after a lot of years of experimentation and trying to figure out how to get this message out there. She had no idea what she was doing, and she was just as down as anybody else, and yet she was still willing to wrap her arms around those people and say, stay with me. And so wherever you are, one of the most powerful things that you can do is serve the person next to you who may not even be as far down as you are. And you will find your voice, and you'll find your ability to help the people around you. And through that, you'll help yourself.
Oh my gosh, you couldn't say that better, because sometimes we think we have to be way up here to help somebody, and
Yep.
sometimes it's just a notch or two ahead. And I've heard people say to me, "You're a great speaker, you're a great mentor," because I don't claim to be perfect. I'm sharing where I'm weak, and I might just be several steps ahead. But that's all they want, is somebody who is relatable, who gets
Yep.
it, who's trying to do what they're doing. And so never go for that perfection. It's just progression. You're moving towards getting better and better,
Yep.
right? I love
100%.
this. Well, Jared,
100%.
thank you for taking your time. This was an amazing conversation. Tell Jen we're so grateful that she let us share this story, and we want to hear more. And all of you guys, we love you, and we appreciate you taking time to listen, and that you can do this. And so we'll talk to you next week in creating confident communication. Bye.